I want a divorce, AMARA. I'm marrying Chidinma and there's nothing you can do about it. The words exploded across my father's funeral reception like a bomb, shattering the somber atmosphere into 1,000 jagged pieces. My husband Chukwuma stood in the center of our living room, his chest heaving with rage, while I sat on the couch, 6 months pregnant, still wearing the black lace wrapper from burying my father just 3 hours ago. What would you do if the man you love chose your father's funeral day to destroy your world? Viewers, before we dive into this incredible story, please do me a favor and help to subscribe right now. Drop a like on this video. It actually helps more than you think. And comment below where you're watching from. Are you in Lagos, New York, London, Jamaica, Canada? I want to know. Chukwuma, what are you saying? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Around us, the few remaining family friends who'd come to pay their respects froze with plates of jollof rice halfway to their mouths. My best friend Ngozi grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my flesh. You heard me clearly, Chukwuma spat, his handsome face twisted with contempt. I've been patient long enough. Your father is gone now, so there's no reason to pretend anymore. Chidinma emerged from behind him like a serpent slithering into view. She was my former coworker from the bank where I'd worked before my pregnancy complications forced me to take early leave. Her tight red dress, red, at my father's funeral reception, clung to her curves as she wrapped her arm possessively around my husband's waist. Sorry, Amara, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But Chukwuma and I have been in love for over a year now. We're getting married next month. You understand, don't you? A man has needs and well, look at you. Her eyes traveled deliberately over my swollen belly, my morning clothes, my tear-stained face. The cruelty in her smile made my stomach turn. Chukwuma, my father just died, my voice broke. My father died yesterday. We buried him this morning. I'm carrying your child. How can you? That's exactly why I'm doing this now, he interrupted, his voice cold as December harmattan wind. Your father was just a janitor, Amara, a school janitor. Do you know how embarrassing that was for me? My colleagues asking what my father-in-law does, and I have to say he cleans toilets at Greenwood Academy. He was a good man, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. He raised me alone after Mama died. He worked 3 jobs to send me to university. And left you with nothing, Chukwuma shouted. I've already spoken to my lawyer. That janitor left you nothing but this small flat in Surulere and maybe some pension money. I'm not spending the rest of my life struggling because you have no inheritance, no family money, nothing to bring to this marriage. Ngozi stood up, her voice shaking with fury. You are a disgrace, Chukwuma. Amara is 6 months pregnant with your child and you choose today to do this. Mind your business, Ngozi, Chidinma snapped. This is between a husband and wife. Oh wait, soon to be ex-wife. She laughed, a high-pitched sound that pierced my heart. I struggled to stand, my pregnant belly making the movement awkward. The room spun around me and I gripped the arm of the couch for support. Please, Chukwuma, please, can we talk about this privately, after the mourners leave, please? He pulled out a brown envelope from his jacket pocket and threw it at my feet. The papers scattered across the floor like dead leaves. Divorce papers, already filed. My lawyer says with your father just dying and you being pregnant, the court will fast-track it. I'll give you something small for the child, but that's all. Sign the papers, Amara. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The baby, your baby, I gasped, clutching my stomach as sharp pain radiated through my abdomen. The stress, the shock, it was all too much. The baby will be fine. You'll get child support, Chukwuma said dismissively. But I'm done with this poverty marriage. Chidinma's father owns 3 car dealerships in Victoria Island. That's the kind of family I should have married into from the beginning. Chidinma preened beside him. Don't feel too bad, Amara. You had a good run. 4 years of marriage isn't bad. But honestly, did you really think a man like Chukwuma would stay with someone like you forever, a janitor's daughter? She examined her manicured nails. "I'll take good care of him. We're flying to Dubai next week for our pre-wedding honeymoon. Business class, of course." The pain in my chest was so intense I thought my heart would stop. My father, a strong, wise, loving father who'd called me his precious jewel, had been buried just hours ago. The man who'd walked me to school every day, who'd taught me to read using newspapers he collected from the staff room, who'd never missed a single parent-teacher meeting despite his 3 jobs. And now, on the very day I laid him to rest, my husband was abandoning me. "Everyone out," Ngozi commanded, her voice cutting through my shock. "All of you leave this house now. You've done enough damage." The remaining guests scurried out, their faces a mixture of pity and scandal-hungry curiosity. I could already hear the gossip spreading across Lagos. "Did you hear? That janitor Hartwell's daughter, her husband left her at the funeral reception for another woman, and she's 6 months pregnant." Chukwuma grabbed his car keys from the side table. "I'll send movers for my things tomorrow. Don't touch anything, Amara. My lawyer is documenting every asset." He paused at the door, not even looking back at me. "You should have been grateful I married you at all. A janitor's daughter with no connections, no money, no prospects. I wasted 4 years of my life." The door slammed behind them, and I heard Chidinma's laughter echoing in the hallway, followed by the sound of Chukwuma's car engine starting. I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking with sobs so violent I couldn't breathe. Ngozi wrapped her arms around me, crying with me. "He doesn't know," I whispered between sobs, my hand on my belly. "He doesn't know what Papa told me before he died." Ngozi pulled back, confusion in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my wrapper and pulled out a small key my father had pressed into my palm during his last moments in the hospital. Attached to it was a card with an address in Ikoyi and a name. Barrister Ademi Ogunlade, senior partner, Ogunlade and Associates. "Papa said," he said, "go to this man after I'm gone, he'll explain everything. You are my precious jewel and I've made sure you'll always shine." Fresh tears poured down my face. I don't understand what he meant. Ngozi stared at the key and card. "When are you going to see this lawyer?" I looked at the divorce papers scattered across my floor, at my empty apartment, at my swollen belly carrying the child of a man who just publicly humiliated me on the worst day of my life. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice suddenly steady despite my tears. "I'm going tomorrow." What I didn't know, what nobody knew, was that my gentle father who'd cleaned toilets and mopped floors for 25 years had been hiding the most explosive secret Lagos had ever seen. A secret that would turn my world upside down and make Chukwuma and Chidinma's betrayal look like the worst mistake of their lives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The morning after the worst night of my life, I woke up on Ngozi's couch with my father's key clutched so tightly in my hand that it had left an imprint on my palm. Every part of my body ached, my back from sleeping awkwardly with my pregnant belly, my head from crying for hours, my heart from a pain so deep I wondered if it would ever heal. Ngozi appeared with a cup of tea and her no-nonsense expression. "Get dressed. We're going to see this lawyer." I looked terrible, I protested weakly, catching sight of my swollen face in the mirror. My eyes were puffy from crying, my natural hair was a mess, and I was still wearing yesterday's morning clothes. "Amara Akafar, your father died and your husband left you pregnant and alone. You're allowed to look terrible." She pulled out a simple blue dress from her closet. "But we're still going to that office. Your father had a reason for giving you that key." An hour later, we pulled up to a gleaming glass building in Ikoyi, one of Lagos's most expensive neighborhoods. The gold lettering on the entrance read, "Ogunlade and Associates, established 1972. This wasn't some small-time lawyer's office. This was one of the most prestigious law firms in Nigeria. "Ngozi, maybe we should leave," I whispered, suddenly nervous. What if Papa got confused before he died? What if? We're going in. She linked her arm through mine and practically dragged me through the revolving doors. The reception area was all marble floors and leather furniture. A receptionist in an expensive suit looked up from her computer. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" I fumbled with the card, my hands shaking. "My name is Amura Ukifka. My father, James Hutwell, told me to come here after he passed." The receptionist's entire demeanor changed. Her professional smile became genuine as she stood up quickly. "Mrs. Ukifka, oh my God, we've been expecting you. I'm so sorry for your loss. Please sit down. I'll get Barrister Ugunlud immediately." Before I could process her reaction, a tall, distinguished man in his 60s emerged from a side door. He had kind eyes and silver hair, and when he saw me, his expression softened with grief. "Amara," he said, and his voice caught. "You look just like your grandmother. Come, my dear, we have much to discuss." He led us into a massive office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Island. Legal books lined the walls, and framed photographs showed Barrister Ugunlud with various Nigerian presidents and governors. "First, let me express my deepest condolences," he began, gesturing for us to sit. "Your father was not only my client but my friend for over 30 years. His death has left a void in many lives." "Thank you, sir," I managed. "But I don't understand. My father was a janitor. How did he know someone like you?" Barrister Ugunlud's eyebrows rose. "A janitor? Is that what he told you?" Confusion washed over me. That's what he was. He worked at Greenwood Academy for 25 years. I used to visit him there after school. I saw him cleaning classrooms, mopping floors. The lawyer opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. "Amara, your father was indeed at Greenwood Academy, but he wasn't a janitor. He was the owner." The world tilted on its axis. "What?" "Your father, James Hutwell, or as he was known in business circles, James Hutwell III, owned not just Greenwood Academy but 15 other schools across Nigeria. He also owned a construction company, several shopping plazas, and had investments in telecommunications, oil and gas, and real estate." Barrister Ugunlud slid a document across the desk. "Your father was worth approximately 5.2 billion naira." The paper slipped from my fingers. Ngozi gasped beside me, grabbing my arm. That's impossible. That's over $3 million. 3.4 million to be exact at current exchange rates," the lawyer confirmed. He looked at me with gentle concern. "Amara, did your father never tell you about his business empire?" "Never," I whispered. My mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the father I knew, the man who wore worn-out clothes and packed his lunch in a plastic container, with what I was hearing. But why? Why would he live like that if he was so wealthy? Barrister Ugunlud leaned back in his chair. "Your father had his reasons. After your mother died when you were 3, he became cautious. He'd seen too many wealthy people's children grow up spoiled, disconnected from reality, targeted by opportunists. He wanted you to grow up with values, with strength, with an understanding of hard work. So he pretended to be poor." My voice rose with emotion. "He let me think we were struggling. I worked 2 jobs during university. I wore second-hand clothes. I stopped, remembering how Chukwuma used to complain about my father's low status. My father had known. He'd known how Chukwuma really felt." "He wasn't pretending to be poor exactly," the lawyer explained. "He was teaching you to be rich in character, and according to his wishes, he was waiting until you were 30 to reveal everything to you. He believed by then you'd have enough life experience to handle wealth responsibly." "I'm only 28, I said numbly. "Yes, his illness came unexpectedly. That's why he had to tell you about me at the end." Barrister Ugunlud pulled out another document, a will. "Everything he owned is now yours, Amara. All of it. He left detailed instructions." Ngozi made a strangled sound beside me. "All of it." "Every single asset. The schools, the businesses, the properties, the investments. But there's more. The lawyer's expression became serious. Your father was a very shrewd man. He knew about Chukwuma's character long before you married him. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? 3 years ago, your father hired private investigators. He discovered that Chukwuma was already having an affair with Chudinma even before your wedding. He saw how Chukwuma spoke about him behind his back, how he was only staying in the marriage waiting for an inheritance that never came. The betrayal cut even deeper. He knew. Papa knew Chukwuma was cheating and he never told me. He wanted to, but he knew you loved Chukwuma and he believed you needed to discover the truth yourself to fully heal from it. So instead, he did something else. Barrister Ugunlud pulled out yet another document. He made your inheritance completely ironclad. Every asset is in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. It was established 4 years ago before your marriage. According to Nigerian law and the prenuptial agreement your father had me draft, which Chukwuma signed without reading properly, your husband has absolutely no legal claim to any of your father's wealth. Prenup. I tried to remember our wedding preparations. I don't remember signing a prenup. You did. Your father insisted. He told Chukwuma it was standard procedure, nothing valuable to protect anyway since he was just a janitor. The lawyer's smile was grim. Chukwuma signed it eagerly, probably thinking it was just a formality for a poor man's daughter. That document now protects billions of naira from any marital claim. The room was spinning. 24 hours ago, I'd buried my father thinking I was a poor widow-to-be. Now I was being told I was a billionaire. There's something else, Barrister Ugunlud said softly. Your father left you a letter. He asked that I give it to you when the time came. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the blue pen Papa always used. My precious jewel, Esterusk. If you're reading this, I've gone to join your mother, and my heart breaks knowing I won't see you become the woman I know you'll be. But I also know this. You are stronger than you realize. By now, Barrister Ugunlud has told you about the money. I know you're confused, maybe even angry with me. Let me explain. When your mother died, I was lost. I was a young man with a fortune but no idea how to raise a daughter. I watched my wealthy friends' children grow up entitled, cruel, disconnected from ordinary people's struggles. I couldn't let that happen to you. So I made a choice. I went to work at Greenwood Academy, the school I owned, as a janitor. I wore the uniform, did the work, lived modestly. I wanted you to grow up knowing the value of every naira, understanding respect for all people regardless of their job, learning that character matters more than money. Watching you grow into a kind, hardworking, humble woman has been my greatest joy. You never treated anyone as beneath you. You worked hard even when you thought we had nothing. You married for love, not money. You became exactly the woman I hoped you'd be. Now about Chukwuma. My child, I know this will hurt, but I know about his betrayal. I've known for years. I wanted to tell you to protect you from the pain. But sometimes we must let people we love make their own mistakes and learn their own lessons. I've protected you the only way I could, legally. Everything I own is yours and yours alone. He can never touch it. And now that you know the truth about both your inheritance and his character, you can make decisions from a position of strength, not weakness. Use this wealth wisely, my jewel. Help others who are struggling as I helped you understand struggle. Build something meaningful. And know that whether you had 1 naira or 1 billion naira, you would always have been my greatest treasure. I love you forever, Esterusk. Papa Esterusk. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Ngozi was crying too, and even Barrister Ugunlud's eyes looked suspiciously bright. He loved you very much, the lawyer said quietly, and he left you everything you need to not just survive this betrayal but to thrive beyond it. I thought about yesterday, about Chukwuma's contempt, Chudunma's mockery, the divorce papers scattered across my floor. They thought they were leaving me with nothing. They had celebrated destroying a poor, pregnant janitor's daughter. They had no idea what was coming. Barrister Augenlade, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. I need to understand exactly what I now own, every detail, every asset, because I have some plans to make. The lawyer smiled, a sharp, knowing smile that told me he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Let's begin with the schools, shall we? Starting with Greenwood Academy, where your husband used to drop you off and complain about your father cleaning floors. The floors of the school your father owned. As he began detailing my father's empire, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, it would always be there. But alongside it grew something else, determination, power, purpose. Chukwuma and Chidinma wanted to marry into wealth. They wanted to climb the social ladder. They wanted to escape the embarrassment of being connected to a janitor. They were about to discover they'd just divorced the richest woman in Lagos under 30. And I was about to show them exactly what my father's precious jewel could do. For 2 weeks after that meeting with Barrister Augenlade, I lived in a strange daze, caught between grief and revelation. Ngozi had taken a leave from her job to stay with me in my small circular flat. The flat I now knew my father had bought outright 20 years ago, though he'd let me believe we were renting it. Every morning I'd wake up and have to remind myself, my father is gone, my marriage is over, and I'm a billionaire. None of it felt real. The divorce papers sat unsigned on my coffee table. Chukwuma had sent 3 messages demanding I sign them. I hadn't responded to any. You need to eat something, Ngozi insisted, placing a plate of plantain and eggs in front of me. The baby needs food, even if you don't feel like eating. I placed my hand on my belly, now 7 months swollen. My baby girl, I'd found out the gender a month ago, kicked vigorously, as if reminding me she was there, depending on me. I'm eating, I protested, but Ngozi's look told me she wasn't fooled by my half-hearted attempts. My phone rang, Barrister Augenlade. Amara, I have some information you need to hear. His voice was tight with anger. My investigators have discovered something. Chukwuma has been meeting with lawyers, trying to find a way to contest your father's will. My hand tightened on the phone, but you said the trust was ironclad. It is, but he's shopping for lawyers who will take his money and tell him what he wants to hear. He's convinced there must be hidden assets he can claim. He's been making inquiries about your father's pension and any properties. Apparently, Chidinma's father has been funding these legal consultations. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. He's that desperate. There's more. They've been spreading rumors around Lagos that your father left you with massive debts. They're telling people you'll be homeless soon, that they did you a favor by leaving before they got dragged into poverty. Chidinma has been particularly active on social media, posting about dodging bullets and knowing when to level up. My hands shook with fury. It wasn't enough that they'd betrayed me, humiliated me at my father's funeral, abandoned me pregnant. Now they were destroying my father's reputation and lying to justify their cruelty. What do I do? I asked. We wait, Barrister Augenlade said. Let them keep digging, let them keep talking. The deeper the hole they dig, the harder they'll fall when the truth comes out. But Amara, I think it's time you started learning about your actual responsibilities. These businesses need oversight. The schools need a board chair. Your father's construction company is bidding on a major government contract next month. You need to step into your role. That afternoon, I went to Barrister Augenlade's office for the first of what would become daily meetings. He'd assembled a team, accountants, business managers, school administrators, and investment advisors. All of them had worked with my father. All of them knew the truth. Mrs. Okafor, the lead accountant, Mrs. Adebio, began. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with kind eyes. Your father's portfolio is diverse and healthy. The schools alone generate approximately 180 million naira annually in profit. The construction company another 200 million. Real estate holdings, investments, and other ventures bring the annual income to around 450 million naira. The numbers were staggering. That was over $300,000 profit per year. Your father lived on less than 5 million naira a year, Mrs. Adebio continued. The rest he invested, grew, or used for charitable causes. He's been funding scholarships for hundreds of students, building wells in rural communities, supporting orphanages, all anonymously. My eyes filled with tears. Of course he had. That was exactly who Papa was. Now let's discuss Greenwood Academy specifically. Mr. Okafor, the school administrator, chimed in. He was no relation to me despite sharing my maiden name. It was a common Igbo surname. Your father built that school 40 years ago. It's now one of the most prestigious secondary schools in Lagos. We have a waiting list of over 500 students. Tuition is 2.5 million naira per year, and we have 800 students currently enrolled. I did the quick math in my head. 2 billion naira in annual tuition alone. Your husband used to drop you off there, correct? Mr. Okafor asked gently. Yes, at the staff entrance. He always complained about having to drive through Yaba to get there, said the school was in a low-class area. The memory stung. The school sits on 10 acres of prime Lagos real estate, now worth approximately 800 million naira, Mr. Okafor said. Your father bought that land in 1985 for a fraction of that. He was a visionary. Over the next week, I immersed myself in learning everything about my father's businesses. I visited the schools incognito, watching students learn in the buildings my father built. I toured the construction sites where his company was building affordable housing. I reviewed the investment portfolios and charitable foundations. And slowly, a plan began forming in my mind. One evening, as Ngozi and I sat reviewing papers, she asked the question that had been hanging in the air. What are you going to do about Chukwuma and Chidinma? I looked up from the scholarship applications I'd been reading. My father had been supporting 150 students from low-income families. I'm going to launch my father's memorial foundation. Ngozi frowned. That's your revenge plan, a charity. Not just any charity. A foundation to support women who have been betrayed, abandoned, or abused. Women facing single motherhood. Women who need legal support, job training, housing assistance, counseling. Everything I would have needed if I actually was the poor, abandoned janitor's daughter everyone thinks I am. Understanding dawned in Ngozi's eyes. You're going to launch it publicly. At the most exclusive venue in Lagos, the Eco Hotel Grand Ballroom, I'm going to invite everyone, all of Lagos high society, business leaders, politicians, media. It'll be the social event of the year. I felt my father's strength flowing through me. And I'm going to invite Chukwuma and Chidinma. They won't come if they know you're hosting it. They won't know. The invitations will be from the Hartwell Foundation, and they'll be addressed to Mr. Chukwuma Okafor and guest. He'll assume it's some rich person's event where he can network. You know how he is about social climbing. Ngozi started laughing. You're going to reveal everything in front of everyone. Not just reveal it. I'm going to show them and all of Lagos exactly who my father was, who I am, what they threw away. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter kick. And I'm going to make sure every woman watching knows that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of your power. The invitations went out 2 weeks later, printed on expensive cream cardstock with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to the inaugural launch of Asterisk, the James Hartwell III Memorial Foundation. Supporting women rising from adversity. Founder and Director, Mrs. A. Hartwell Okafor. Eco Hotel Grand Ballroom. Saturday, 7 p.m. Black tie asterisk. I'd kept my married name on the invitation deliberately. Let them think I was using Chukwuma's name. Let them come unprepared. 3 days before the event, Barrister Ogunlade called with news. Chukwuma tried to bribe one of the hotel staff to find out who's hosting the event. He thinks it's some business opportunity. Chidinma has been shopping for a designer dress. Apparently, she's telling people they're going to an exclusive billionaire's party. Perfect, I said. Amara, the lawyer's voice turned serious. Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. Your private life becomes public. Everyone will know everything. I thought about my father, who'd worked as a janitor in his own school so I could grow up humble, who'd loved me enough to protect me even after death, who'd believed I was strong enough to handle anything. I'm sure, I said. It's time for my father's legacy to be known, and it's time for Chukwuma and Chidinma to face what they've done. On the morning of the event, I stood in front of the mirror in my new home, a penthouse in Ikoyi that had belonged to my father. I was 8 months pregnant now, my belly prominent beneath the custom-made emerald green gown that made me look like royalty. My natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, and I wore the diamond necklace that had been my grandmother's, the grandmother I'd never known existed until 3 weeks ago. Ngozi stood beside me, stunning in a gold dress. You look like a queen. I feel like I'm about to throw up, I admitted. That's just pregnancy and nerves. You're going to walk in there and you're going to show all of Lagos who you really are. She squeezed my hand. Your father would be so proud. As our car pulled up to the Eco Hotel, I could see the red carpet, the photographers, the who's who of Lagos society arriving in their expensive cars and designer clothes. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Ready? Ngozi asked. I thought about Chukwuma's words. Your father was just a janitor. I thought about Chidinma's mockery. Did you really think a man like Chukwuma would stay with someone like you forever? I placed my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter move. My father's granddaughter, the next generation of the Hartwell legacy. I'm ready, I said. Let's show them exactly what a janitor's daughter can do. The Eco Hotel Grand Ballroom glittered like something from a dream. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the cream walls, and arrangements of orchids and roses perfumed the air. Round tables draped in white silk seated 10 guests each, and the stage at the front of the room was set with a podium bearing the Hartwell Foundation logo, a phoenix rising from flames, symbolizing rebirth through adversity. I watched from a private viewing room adjacent to the ballroom as Lagos's elite filed in. Governors, business moguls, Nollywood celebrities, old money families. Everyone who was anyone had accepted the invitation. The event had generated tremendous buzz. Nobody knew who was behind the mysterious Hartwell Foundation, but the cause and the exclusive venue had made it the must-attend event of the season. There, Ngozi whispered, pointing to the entrance. Chukwuma walked in wearing an expensive tuxedo I'd never seen before, probably bought with Chidinma's father's money. Chidinma clung to his arm in a red designer gown that probably cost more than I used to make in 6 months at the bank. Her hair was elaborately styled, and she wore enough jewelry to stock a small store. They looked around the ballroom with barely concealed greed, already networking, shaking hands with people they deemed important enough. I watched Chukwuma introduce Chidinma to a prominent businessman, saw how he puffed up his chest when discussing his own consulting firm. The business he'd started with money he'd hidden from our joint account during our marriage. Look at them, Ngozi said with disgust, acting like they belong here. They do belong here, I said quietly, just not in the way they think. Mrs. Adebyo, who was coordinating the event, knocked softly. Mrs. Hartwell-Akafor, we're ready whenever you are. Everyone's seated. The media is in position. Yes, media. I'd invited carefully selected journalists from the most reputable outlets, along with several popular bloggers. This night would be documented. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my gown over my 8-month belly. Let's begin. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. A video began playing on the large screens positioned around the ballroom. It showed images of my father, not as the janitor in worn clothes, but in photographs from his youth and middle age, dressed in fine suits, cutting ribbons at school openings, receiving business awards. The narrator's voice was professional and warm. James Hartwell III was born in 1950 to one of Lagos's pioneering families. A graduate of the University of Lagos with a degree in business administration, he built an education and construction empire that has shaped modern Nigeria. I watched the audience's confusion grow. Who was this Hartwell? Why hadn't they heard of him if he was so influential? The video continued, showing the 15 schools, the construction projects, the charitable work, all of it done quietly, without fanfare. Then it showed my father in his janitor's uniform at Greenwood Academy. But James Hartwell III believed that true wealth was not in accumulation, but in character. For 25 years, he worked as a janitor in his own school, teaching his daughter the value of humility, hard work, and treating every human being with dignity. Gasps rippled through the audience. I saw Chukwuma lean forward, frowning, saw Chidinma whisper something to him urgently. The video ended with my father's face, his gentle smile, and the words, "In memory of a man who believed that how you treat people when you have nothing reveals who you are when you have everything." The lights came up gradually, and I walked onto the stage. The gasp that went through the room was audible. I saw heads turning, whispers spreading like wildfire. At table 7, Chukwuma's mouth fell open. Chidinma's face went white, then red, then white again. I stood at the podium, 8 months pregnant, wearing 3 million naira worth of jewelry, looking out at a sea of shocked faces. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "My name is Amara Richardson Hartwell-Akefer. I am the daughter of James Hartwell III and the founder and director of the Hartwell Foundation." The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed. I saw several society women checking their phones, probably already Googling my name. "Most of you didn't know my father. He preferred it that way. He believed that real integrity is what you do when nobody's watching, and real character is how you treat people who can do nothing for you." I paused, letting the words sink in. For 25 years, my father worked as a janitor at Greenwood Academy, a school he owned. He mopped floors in buildings he'd built. He cleaned toilets in an institution that bore his family name on the original deed. I could see comprehension dawning on faces throughout the room. The prestigious Greenwood Academy, where many of their own children attended, had been owned by a janitor. He did this to teach me a lesson, to raise me understanding that no honest work is beneath anyone, that wealth without character is worthless, and that how people treat you when they think you have nothing reveals their true nature. My eyes found Chukwuma's table. He was frozen, his face ashen. Chidinma was gripping his arm so tightly her knuckles were white. 2 weeks ago, I buried my father. He died of a sudden illness, leaving me to grieve not only his loss but also the revelation of who he truly was. The same day of his funeral, my husband, I gestured toward Chukwuma, and every eye in the room turned to him, announced he was divorcing me to marry his mistress of over 3 years. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few shocked cries. The cameras swiveled to capture Chukwuma and Chidinma's table. Several people at nearby tables had moved their chairs away, as if scandalized association might be contagious. "His reasoning was simple," I continued, my voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "My father was just a janitor. I had no family money, no connections, no prospects. I was 6 months pregnant and, in his words, an embarrassment. He wanted to level up to a woman whose father owned car dealerships. He wanted to escape the poverty he believed marriage to a janitor's daughter would bring." Chidinma tried to stand, but her legs seemed to give out. She collapsed back into her chair. Chukwuma was staring at me with an expression of absolute horror. What neither my ex-husband nor his mistress knew was that my father had established an irrevocable trust 4 years ago, before my marriage, placing all his assets under my sole control. His estate, valued at 5.2 billion naira, includes 15 schools across Nigeria, a construction company currently valued at 1.8 billion naira, multiple real estate holdings, and various investments. I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. My father knew about the affair. He knew about the betrayal, and he made absolutely certain that the man who called him just a janitor would never touch a single kobo of the fortune he'd built. The room exploded. People were standing, talking, pointing. Phones were out everywhere. This was going to be all over social media within minutes. The journalists were scribbling frantically. "So tonight," I said, raising my voice over the commotion, "I'm launching the James Hartwell III Memorial Foundation with an initial endowment of 500 million naira. This foundation will support women who find themselves betrayed, abandoned, facing single motherhood, or otherwise in crisis. We'll provide legal support, job training, housing assistance, counseling, and educational scholarships." I placed my hand on my belly, because my father taught me that when life knocks you down, you don't stay down. You rise, you help others rise, and you never, ever forget where you came from or who helped you when you had nothing. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. People were standing, clapping, some wiping tears. I saw several women crying openly, women who perhaps had their own stories of betrayal and survival. Through it all, Chukwuma sat motionless, his face gray. Chidinma was crying, her carefully applied makeup running down her face in black streaks. "Before we begin our program," I said, "I'd like to address my ex-husband directly." I looked at Chukwuma and the room fell silent again. "You once told me I should be grateful you married me at all, that you wasted 4 years of your life on a janitor's daughter. You're right about one thing, you did waste 4 years, but not because of my father's job. You wasted them because you never learned what he tried to teach through his example, that a person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account and everything to do with their character." I paused, letting the words hit their target. "You divorced me thinking I had nothing. In reality, you divorced a woman who now controls more wealth than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. You left me for another woman thinking you were upgrading. In reality, you downgraded so drastically that I almost feel sorry for Miss Chidinma, who just realized she left her stable job to marry a man who abandoned his billionaire wife." Chidinma let out a strangled sob and stood up, stumbling toward the exit. Chukwuma sat frozen, seemingly unable to move. "But this evening isn't about revenge," I continued, my voice softening. "It's about redemption. It's about honoring my father's legacy by helping women who are where I would have been if not for his protection. So please enjoy this evening. Donate generously if you're able. And remember that sometimes the people you overlook are the very ones who could have changed your life." I stepped down from the podium to deafening applause. As I made my way through the crowd, people wanted to shake my hand, offer congratulations, pledge donations. I smiled, thanked them, played the gracious hostess, all while feeling a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. Ngozi appeared at my elbow, her eyes shining with fierce pride. "That was perfect, absolutely perfect." "Where did they go?" I asked. Chidinma ran out crying, "Chukwuma, well, come see for yourself." She led me to a side corridor where Chukwuma stood against the wall, his face in his hands. When he heard our footsteps, he looked up. His eyes were red, his expression devastated. "Amara," he started. "Don't," I said quietly. "There's nothing you can say that matters now." "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear I didn't know if I had known." "If you had known my father was rich, you would have stayed," I finished for him. "That's exactly the point, Chukwuma. That's exactly who you are. You married me thinking you were doing me a favor. You divorced me thinking you were escaping poverty. You never once loved me for who I was. You loved what you thought you could get from me." "Please," he said, and I was shocked to see tears on his face. "Please, Amara, the baby, my daughter, I made a mistake. I'll do anything." "You'll do exactly what the custody agreement says," I interrupted. "Supervised visits, twice a month, at the schedule my lawyer sets. You'll pay the child support amount the court determines, though we both know it'll be a tiny fraction of what I'm worth. And you'll do it with gratitude because I could make it much harder for you if I wanted to." "Amara." "My name is Mrs. Hartwell-Lockaffer now. You can call me that or nothing at all." I turned to leave, then stopped. "You know what the saddest part is? My father liked you at first. He thought you'd be good to me. When he found out about Chidinma, he didn't expose you. He just made sure I'd be protected when you eventually showed your true self. He believed in giving people enough rope to hang themselves. Congratulations, Chukwuma, you succeeded." I walked away, leaving him standing in that hallway, the sounds of celebration and music drifting from the ballroom where Lagos society was toasting to the Hartwell Foundation, to my father's legacy, and to the woman who'd risen from the ashes of betrayal to become one of the most powerful philanthropists in the city. If you're loving this story of justice, hit that subscribe button. Comment what you think happens next. Will Chidinma stick around or run? What should Amara do with her fortune? Let me know below. 3 weeks later, I stood in the maternity ward of Lagos University Teaching Hospital, my daughter nestled in my arms. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 6 ounces of pure miracle with my father's nose and my eyes. I'd named her Naomi James Hartwell-Lockaffer. Naomi for pleasantness, after so much pain, James for the grandfather she'd never meet but whose legacy she'd carry. "She's beautiful," Ngozi whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held my daughter for the first time. "She has his smile, Amara. Look at her smile." I looked at my daughter's tiny face and felt my father's presence so strongly it took my breath away. He would never hold her, never sing to her, never teach her the lessons he'd taught me. But his love surrounded us anyway, in the security he'd provided, in the values he'd instilled, in the future he'd made possible. The door opened, and Barrister Augenlade entered with a huge bouquet of roses. "Congratulations, my dear. She's absolutely precious." He placed the flowers on the bedside table and handed me a folder. "I hate to bring business at a time like this, but you need to see this." Inside was a court document. Chukwuma was petitioning for full custody. I stared at the papers, a cold rage building in my chest. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming you're mentally unstable, that you publicly humiliated him out of spite, that your wealth makes you an unfit mother who'll spoil the child, and that he can provide a more stable, normal home environment." Barrister Augenlade's voice was tight with anger. "It's completely baseless, and no judge will take it seriously, but it shows his desperation." "He doesn't want her," I said quietly, understanding flooding through me. "He wants leverage. He wants to negotiate. He thinks if he threatens to fight for custody, I'll pay him to go away." "That's my assessment as well. Chidinma's father has cut them off completely. The man was humiliated when the story broke. Apparently, his business has suffered from the association. Chidinma has no job. Chukwuma's consulting firm is failing because no one wants to work with the man who publicly betrayed the Hartwell heiress. They're desperate." "Let him come," I said, looking down at my sleeping daughter. "Let him try to explain to a judge why he divorced his pregnant wife at her father's funeral, why he ignored her through her entire pregnancy, why he only wants custody now that he knows she's a billionaire's granddaughter. Let him try." The custody hearing was 3 months later. I walked into the Lagos High Court wearing a tailored navy suit, my postpartum body still carrying extra weight but my posture straight and strong. Naomi was with Ngozi in the waiting room, too young to be brought into court. Chukwuma sat at the plaintiff's table with a lawyer who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Chidinma wasn't there. According to Ngozi's sources, she'd left Chukwuma 2 weeks after the foundation gala and moved back with her parents. The judge, Justice Adayinka, was a woman in her 60s known for her no-nonsense approach to family law. Chukwuma's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client seeks custody of his daughter on the grounds that the mother has demonstrated instability and vindictive behavior. She publicly humiliated Mr. Okafor, weaponized her wealth against him, and has created an environment where the child would be exposed to excessive luxury and spoiling. Justice Adayinka raised an eyebrow. Counsel, are you arguing that the child should be removed from her mother because the mother is too wealthy? Not too wealthy, Your Honor, but the circumstances of how she obtained and flaunts that wealth show poor judgment. She threw a gala specifically to embarrass my client. She threw a gala to launch a charitable foundation, Justice Adayinka interrupted. I attended that event myself. I found nothing embarrassing about it except your client's behavior, but please continue. Chukwuma's lawyer stumbled through his argument, presenting evidence of my instability that amounted to nothing more than tabloid gossip and speculation. When he finished, Justice Adayinka turned to Barrister Augenlade. Does the respondent wish to present evidence? Extensively, Your Honor. Barrister Augenlade stood, and for the next hour he systematically destroyed Chukwuma's case. He presented the timeline of the affair, the divorce papers filed on the day of my father's funeral, the complete absence of support during my pregnancy. He presented character witnesses, my doctor, my former coworkers, professors from university, administrators from my father's schools, all testifying to my stability, character, and capability. Then he played a recording. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to play a voice message Mr. Okafor left for his wife 2 days before she gave birth. The message played through the courtroom speakers. Chukwuma's voice, angry and demanding. Amara, sign over access to the Hartwell Trust and I'll drop the custody case. I know you don't want to fight in court while pregnant. Give me 50 million naira and I'll sign away all parental rights. Otherwise, I'll make this as messy as possible. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Justice Adayinka's expression was thunderous. Mr. Okafor, she said, her voice icy, did you just attempt to sell your parental rights for 50 million naira? Chukwuma's face was gray. Your Honor, I was emotional, I didn't mean. You didn't mean to try to extort the mother of your child. Justice Adayinka's voice could have cut glass. You didn't mean to abandon your pregnant wife at her father's funeral. You didn't mean to only seek custody after discovering she's wealthy. She looked at the papers before her with disgust. This petition is denied. Full custody is awarded to the mother. Mr. Okafor, you are granted supervised visitation twice monthly, pending completion of a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. You will pay child support in the amount determined by the state guidelines. And if you ever try to use your daughter as leverage for money again, you will lose even supervised visits. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, Chukwuma whispered. Furthermore, Justice Adayinka continued, I'm recommending the recording of your attempted extortion be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Trying to sell access to your child is not just morally reprehensible, Mr. Okafor. In some interpretations, it could be considered criminal. As we left the courthouse, I felt the last chains of my old life falling away. Chukwuma couldn't hurt me anymore. He had no power, no leverage, no claim on me or my daughter beyond what the court allowed. It's over, Barrister Augenlade said gently. You're free, Amara, completely free. 5 years later, I stood at the entrance of Greenwood Academy, watching parents drop off their children for the first day of school. The building had been renovated and expanded, but my father's values remained embedded in every corner. Scholarships now covered 30% of students, children from families who couldn't otherwise afford the excellent education provided here. Mama, is this where Grandpa worked? A small voice asked, and I looked down at Naomi, now 5 years old, wearing her new school uniform with pride. Yes, baby. This is where Grandpa worked every day so he could be close to you when you started school here. Even though he owned it. Especially because he owned it. He wanted to be just like everyone else, so people would treat him honestly. I knelt down to her level. Remember what I always tell you about Grandpa's lesson. How people treat you when they think you have nothing shows who they really are, Naomi recited dutifully. Then she grinned, showing a missing front tooth. And that's why we help people, right, Mama? Because Grandpa helped everybody. That's right, sweetheart. I kissed her forehead. Now go on, Miss Okonkwo is waiting for you. I watched my daughter run toward her teacher, the daughter of Mr. Okonkwo, who'd been one of my father's first hires 40 years ago. Full circle, I thought. Everything coming full circle. The Hartwell Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd helped over 2,000 women in 5 years, providing legal assistance, job training, housing, and counseling. 3 women had gone on to start their own businesses. 5 had completed university degrees. 12 had left abusive relationships and rebuilt their lives. And every single one of them carried forward my father's lesson. Rise up, help others rise, and never forget your value is not in your bank account but in your character. As for Chukwuma, he'd faded into obscurity. He'd completed his supervised visits sporadically for the first 2 years, then stopped coming altogether. Naomi didn't ask about him anymore. She had her grandfather's legacy, her mother's love, and a future bright with possibility. Chidinma had moved to Abuja, married another man, and by all accounts was living a quiet, modest life. I bore her no ill will. She'd been a symptom, not the disease. The disease had been Chukwuma's character, and that had revealed itself perfectly. My phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Adebio. The new school in Ibadan is ready for opening ceremony next month. Your father would be so proud. I smiled, looking up at the Greenwood Academy sign, then at my daughter disappearing through the doors into her classroom. Yes, I thought. He would be proud, not of the money or the buildings or the social status. He'd be proud that his precious jewel had learned his greatest lesson, that true wealth is measured not in billions of naira, but in lives touched, people helped, and love shared. Thank you, Papa, I whispered to the morning air. Thank you for everything. And as I walked back to my car, not the Mercedes or the Range Rover, but the modest Honda I still drove sometimes, just to remember, I felt complete. The betrayal that had once shattered me had remade me into something stronger. The loss that had broken my heart had opened my eyes to my true purpose. I was Amara Richardson Hartwell-Akefer, daughter of a janitor, heir to a fortune, founder of a foundation, mother of a beautiful daughter, and guardian of a legacy that would outlive us all. And I was finally truly free. If this tale touched your soul, dear listener, please leave a like and subscribe. Each story I tell carries wisdom from long ago, and with your support, I can continue sharing these treasures with the world. What lesson did you take from Amara's journey? Comment below. I read every single one. And remember, your true value is never determined by those who failed to see it. Sometimes, the best revenge is becoming so successful that your betrayer becomes a footnote in your victory story. From Lagos to London, from New York to Nairobi, wherever you're watching from, remember, rise up, help others rise, and never let anyone make you feel small. Until next time, this is African Tale's Vault, and I'll see you in the next story.